in some capacity, because really outstanding. To me, it was disappointing, I'll be honest. I have to be straight. I was disappointed. A lot of people were disappointed.
In Washington, power usually announces itself with memos, titles, and office doors. This time, the signal came through subtraction. Ed Martin, a Trump ally placed inside the Justice Department to lead a weaponization working group, was removed from oversight of that effort, according to public reporting. He remained the department's pardon attorney, but he was moved out of the main Justice Department headquarters to a separate office building. The reason was not publicly explained. The result is not clarity. It is constrained, delivered quietly, before the public can even see the full paper trail. Trump's posture toward the Justice Department has been built around a single claim: that law enforcement power was turned into a political weapon against him and his supporters. According to public reporting, Attorney General Pam Bondi created a DOJ weaponization working group to review what the administration described as politicized prosecutions and investigations. The structure fit Trump's preferred logic: reframe past cases as abuse, then use a new internal review to regain narrative control. The miscalculation was treating the review itself as a lever of authority. A working group can generate headlines, but it cannot erase procedures, career oversight, or the department's institutional habit of minimizing legal exposure. Even the existence of the group, as described in official documents, pointed toward process, examinations, reporting, and internal guardrails, not an instant political verdict. Ed Martin was a symbol designed for that posture. Reuters and the Associated Press reported that he was aligned with Trump and placed in a senior DOJ role, including leadership of the weaponization review, while also serving as pardon attorney. Then the symbol started collapsing. Reuters reported he lost oversight of the weaponization work. AP and other outlets reported he was removed as the group's head and relocated from DOJ headquarters to an office building elsewhere in Washington. That is not a policy win. It is a management signal. When a politically charged unit loses its visible leader, the department is communicating constraint. The message is not delivered as a public rebuke. It is delivered through internal assignment, physical distance, and narrowed authority. And because the reason was not publicly explained, the vacuum produces a second pressure point. The administration cannot fully define the story without risking more scrutiny of what happened inside the review. Trump's attempt to project control through a weaponization banner has, at minimum, produced a public personnel retreat that undermines the banner itself. A congressional record entry from early 2025 captured how quickly the weaponization concept became a flashpoint, describing the effort as an attempt to investigate the investigators and to pursue retribution. That public framing matters because it increases the cost of improvisation inside DOJ. Every misstep looks less like oversight and more like political targeting. The conditions are now set for further institutional narrowing. Once the personnel change becomes public, the story is no longer about what the working group might find. It becomes about what the department is willing to let the working group do. According to Reuters, Martin was removed from overseeing the weaponization effort, but kept as a pardon attorney. According to AP, he was moved out of DOJ headquarters to another office building. Washington Post reporting similarly said it was not immediately clear why he was no longer in charge. That combination is a pressure diagram. The title is reduced, the access is altered, and the explanation is withheld. In a normal bureaucracy, relocation can be routine. Inside a politically charged review unit, relocation reads as risk management. Physical distance from headquarters reduces day-to-day contact with leadership corridors, narrows informal influence, and limits the kind of spontaneous coordination that turns a task force into real power. None of that requires a public statement. The institution can shrink the effective radius of a person's authority without ever admitting it is doing so. Trump's blind spot is that DOJ authority is not only written in org charts. It is embedded in who can convene, who can see what, who can direct staff, and who can speak for the department without creating liability. A weaponization review designed for public legitimacy creates the opposite incentive. Senior officials have to ensure the review does not itself become the evidence of politicization. Official DOJ documents establishing the working group described a structured review of perceived weaponization and contemplated reporting on progress. That is not the language of a personal political campaign. It is the language of a department preparing to justify its actions later in oversight hearings, litigation, and public records disputes. A review framed too aggressively can trigger the very scrutiny it is meant to deflect. This is where the Martin shift matters as an institutional signal. If the group under his leadership was not making progress, as public reporting cited by AP and the Washington Post suggested, the department is admitting that a loyalty-first approach cannot generate an operational product. If the department feared process errors or reputational exposure, a narrower assignment reduces the blast radius. Either way, the effect on Trump is the same. His chosen vehicle for narrating weaponization is now associated with internal adjustment rather than outward momentum. The second-order consequence is strategic. Trump's messaging thrives on simple binaries: control versus chaos, loyalty versus betrayal. Bureaucracies operate on gradations: authority reallocated, access constrained, responsibility shifted. When those gradations become the public story, Trump's leverage drops because he cannot credibly claim the department is executing his storyline while the department is visibly reorganizing the cast. Bloomberg Law reported a DOJ spokesperson's statement praising Martin's work as pardon attorney while declining to characterize the change as a demotion. That kind of careful phrasing is itself an institutional constraint. The department avoids creating a paper trail that concedes internal dysfunction, but it also avoids affirming the review as a priority led by Martin. The result is a muted defense that preserves discretion for further containment. In practice, this forces a narrowing of options. If Trump escalates the rhetoric, the institution has more reason to tighten compliance and slow anything that looks like retaliation. If he softens the rhetoric, he concedes that his flagship review did not deliver what the posture promised. The pressure is structural, and it intensifies as each internal adjustment becomes external news. The climax of this episode is not a courtroom ruling. It is a power audit happening in real time, inside the same institution Trump keeps describing as captured. The weaponization narrative depends on a simple promise: install loyal overseers, expose the alleged abuses, and reverse the moral hierarchy of the last 4 years. But according to public reporting, the first visible outcome of the oversight project was the removal of its own leader from oversight. Reuters reported that Martin lost oversight of the weaponization working group while remaining the pardon attorney. AP reported he was removed as head and relocated from DOJ headquarters. The Washington Post reported the reason was not immediately clear and cited a person familiar with the matter, saying the group was not making much progress under his leadership. Those are not small details. They are the measurable outcome of Trump's decision to turn an internal review into a public symbol. Here is the adversarial framing that emerges from the facts. Trump's approach assumes that legitimacy can be manufactured through assertion. Call past prosecutions weaponized, then assign a review to validate the claim, then cite the review as proof. But the Justice Department is not built to validate political slogans. It is built to survive later scrutiny. That means documentation, controlled access, and caution about anything that resembles targeting. A unit created to prove weaponization is immediately trapped by the same standard it is trying to impose. It must look defensible to people who do not share Trump's premise. The official document establishing the working group described an expansive review of perceived abuses and contemplated periodic reporting. That puts the project on a timeline and creates accountability artifacts, memos, meeting notes, drafts, and internal debates. Once those artifacts exist, they can be requested, leaked, or subpoenaed, and they can boomerang. That is why progress becomes a dangerous metric. If the group produces aggressive findings, it invites litigation and oversight questions about whether the group itself was politicized. If it produces little, it becomes evidence that the promised correction was performative. Either outcome is negative for Trump's leverage. Martin's sidelining becomes the visible resolution of that trap. If, as sources told AP and the Washington Post, the group was not making much progress, the department had a clear incentive to remove the face of stagnation. But the moment it does, it admits a deeper reality. Trump's loyalist staffing strategy cannot conjure a deliverable inside a cautious legal bureaucracy. That is the first pressure point. The second pressure point is credibility. Martin retained the pardon attorney role, according to Reuters and AP. That means the department did not publicly eject him, it redistributed him. A redistribution like that signals a containment approach. Limit exposure where the political optics are hottest. keep the official where the role is narrower and more procedural. In Bloomberg Law's account, the department's messaging emphasized that Martin continued in his pardon role. The careful wording preserves flexibility for DOJ to tighten further without admitting a retreat. The third pressure point is geography. Martin being moved out of headquarters, as AP and Reuters reported, is not just a commute change. Headquarters is where informal power accumulates. Who sees leadership, who is in the room when priorities are set, who can walk a concern up the chain. Remove a person from that space, and the institution can lower the temperature without writing a harsh public statement. Trump's posture depends on visible dominance. Bureaucratic containment depends on quiet distance. The fourth pressure point is the public record. A congressional record entry in early 2025 described the working group as a step toward retribution and investigate the investigators. That kind of language is not neutral. It becomes a reference point. It increases the incentive for DOJ leadership to prevent the group from appearing to validate retaliatory intent. Even if the administration avoids using that word, the institution knows the word exists in the record, and it knows oversight audiences can cite it back at them. Now, the most damaging part for Trump. This episode turns his own claim into a stress test he fails. If the department was truly under Trump's command, a loyalist leading the review would be protected and empowered until findings were produced. The opposite happened. The leader was removed from oversight, and the reason was not publicly explained. The lack of explanation is not a blank space Trump can fill. It is a silence created by legal incentives. Saying too much can create liability, saying too little can still achieve containment. This is why the unit becomes a mirror. A weaponization effort is supposed to demonstrate that Trump can discipline an institution. Instead, it demonstrates that the institution can discipline Trump's effort. The hierarchy flips. The department's core survival strategy is procedural legitimacy. Trump's strategy is political spectacle. When they collide, the bureaucracy does what it always does. It reduces risk. The consequences are concrete and negative. First, Trump loses a clean line of messaging. He can no longer point to a single empowered loyalist running a flagship review. Second, he loses time. A working group that is reorganizing leadership is not producing fast public outputs. Third, he loses deterrence. Potential targets inside the bureaucracy see the reallocation as proof that internal resistance can outlast political pressure. Fourth, he loses the ability to claim that the weaponization story is settling into a stable institutional verdict, because stability is precisely what the department refused to provide. At the center of the climax, Martin is both present and absent. He remains a senior official, but the most controversial authority is gone. That split is the institutional verdict on Trump's miscalculation. Loyalty can be retained, but power is conditional. And once power becomes conditional inside DOJ, the presidency stops being the only clock that matters. The worsening condition is locked in by the department's own caution. If leadership believed the group was not making progress, it can keep narrowing until the project becomes inert. If leadership believed the project created reputational risk, it can keep narrowing until the risk is contained. In either scenario, Trump is left with a weakened instrument, a louder controversy, and fewer credible ways to claim control. After the Martin shift, Trump's remaining options narrow, not because of a court order, but because of institutional incentives. The White House can keep repeating weaponization, but the Justice Department's visible behavior now signals containment. Reuters and AP reported that Martin no longer oversaw the weaponization review and was moved out of headquarters while remaining a pardon attorney. The Washington Post reported the lack of a clear public explanation and cited a person familiar with the matter suggesting limited progress under his leadership. Trump's posture is to treat DOJ as a theater of political correction. The miscalculation is assuming the department will accept that role without protecting itself. A review unit framed as retribution in the public record, including congressional language describing investigate the investigators, raises the department's risk profile. The higher the risk profile, the stronger the incentive for leadership to insist on procedure, documentation, and careful messaging. That is how bureaucracies survive. They do not fight the president on television. They narrow the lanes in which the president's people can safely operate. The negative consequence is operational drag. A working group that loses its chair, loses headquarters proximity, and attracts press attention cannot easily operate with speed or discretion. That drag feeds a second consequence. It increases the probability that the administration's next move will be judged on optics rather than outcomes. Trump can announce reviews, but he cannot force a deliverable without creating more institutional pushback. The third consequence is reputational spillover. Bloomberg Law described DOJ's effort to emphasize Martin's continued pardon role while avoiding a full explanation of the broader shift. That careful ambiguity looks like hedging, and hedging looks like instability. Instability inside DOJ strengthens external oversight incentives. Lawmakers, watchdogs, and press outlets become more alert to whether the weaponization posture is producing misuse of authority. A key constraint sits in the paperwork. The Justice Department memorandum creating the working group described a review designed to produce progress reports. That design turns the project into a record-making machine. Records create accountability, and accountability creates veto points. Staff can demand clearer legal theories, narrower scopes, and written justifications. Leadership can require sign-off chains that slow impulsive moves. Each additional checkpoint reduces the chance that the review can be used as a fast political weapon and increases the chance that it becomes a slow institutional burden. Lawfare's coverage of the Bondi memo slate emphasized how internal directives can reshape priorities while still binding the department to formal language and institutional credibility. That matters because Trump's approach relies on speed and simplicity. The department's survival relies on slow, defensible steps. Once the working group becomes controversial, the defensible path is to narrow, document, and delay. Even Martin's remaining role highlights the constraint. The pardon attorney position is procedural and case-based. It is not a roaming mandate to remake the department. By leaving him in that lane, the department preserves an administrative function while removing him from the most politically combustible assignment. That is not loyalty rewarded. It is power segmented. The tightening is already visible, and it rarely loosens once it becomes headline evidence. According to public reporting, the Trump administration elevated a weaponization review inside the Justice Department as a symbol of correction. The symbol was meant to be simple. A loyal overseer reviews the last era. The department is fixed, and Trump claims vindication. Instead, the public record moved the other way. Reuters reported that Ed Martin lost oversight of the weaponization working group while remaining the department's pardon attorney and working out of a satellite office. The Associated Press reported he was removed as head and relocated out of DOJ headquarters, with the reason not publicly explained. The Washington Post also reported it was not immediately clear why he was no longer in charge and cited a person familiar with the matter, suggesting the group was not making much progress under his leadership. Those facts lock in the power outcome. Trump's decision to politicize a review created incentives for DOJ leadership to reduce risk through quiet containment. The miscalculation was believing that a banner and an appointment could overpower a bureaucracy designed to protect itself with procedure and paper. The resistance did not require a dramatic clash. It only required reassignment, distance, and silence. The destabilizing consequence is structural. Trump keeps an ally inside DOJ, but loses the authority most useful to his posture, leaving him with a weaker claim and narrower options as scrutiny increases.